chief of Yale. I grew up my entire life on an Indian Reserve number 5, Albert Flat, member of Yale First Nation. When I was a youth, some of the main things that jump out at me are spending time with my cousins. I spent a lot of time in Yale with my grandma, Elsie Hope, and my mother, Maureen Hope. Lots of memories being at the creek, swimming, Yale school. Went to school in Yale up to grade 6. I spent a lot of time there, and that's where I met a lot of other relatives at the time. I didn't know they're relatives of mine, but they're from Chihuahua area, from Chihuahua area. I didn't see too many other people, other First Nations there. I've seen mostly Yale people and non-Native community people. I have a lot of really grassroots people, grassroots friends in the town of Yale that I grew up with, and consider them part of the community. My first fish, I don't remember the first time I caught my first fish. I remember being packed down the rocks right below Yale Tunnel. My Uncle Everett used to fish there, and then later let my mom fish there. My dad would pack me down the rocks, check the net on the pole, and then pack the fish up, and then pack me back up the rocks. I remember packing fish. I'd do 2 at a time, and 3 at a time, and 5 at a time, up to where my brother and I, when we were fishing by ourselves, we'd pack, 10, 15, 18 fish at a time. As much would sit in, or would fit in the back of a potato sack. I spent you sleep on the rocks there. Enjoyed fishing a lot up there. I was hunting. I got my first rifle, which I still use today, from my father. I don't know their age. I was probably 14 years old or so. And I was hunting up behind my house where my parents live, and they still live today. And that's where I shot my first buck. And I explained it to my dad and my mom like I was playing peekaboo with him. He was behind a bush and I was behind a bush, and we'd stick our heads up and look at each other and then put our heads back down. And so I took that buck there and took my belt off and drug him back down home with my belt. That was my first deer, and I can show you the exact same spot, exactly where it is today, right behind my house. I have a hard time acknowledging the Native traditions that I was taught. I was a product of a family's quest for power, quest for money. I don't believe everything I was taught when I was young. The first 28 years of my life were very geared at exclusion of all others. The things I was taught, when we harvested deer, the insides, like you put the sticks in a certain way, and you hide the gut pile in a certain manner, and you say your own prayers. And so I believe things like that. What I don't believe is that exclusively we held certain beliefs, like we didn't drum, we didn't sing. I don't believe those. I wasn't really shown that much. We did burnings, but they were done by people who, in my eyes, don't hold the proper cultural teachings. So now I learned that these are very dangerous. When you open up the spirit worlds in a burning to acknowledge or send gifts or ask. Now I understand why certain things happened in my life, right? I grew up a very good life. I was never cold, I was never hungry. My dad's non-native, my mom's native. So I ate a lot of very cultural foods, a lot of fish, a lot of deer meat. And I was always a chubby kid, so I was very insecure about myself. And I grew up in a time where as long as we're around other Indians, we're okay, but as soon as we came to the town of Hope for school is when I really realized I was different than people. I was exposed to racism at that time. I was exposed to gang-like mentality, I guess, and I didn't understand it, but only hanging out with the natives, at that time, I was part of like a little native gang, and we stuck together, but we always had our non-native friends in there. So I found safety in numbers. I was insecure about myself. I was scared, afraid, lots. So I really grasped onto manners and behaviors that weren't mine, just to fit in society. I started using drugs, started drinking alcohol. During high school, we would drink 6 beer at 10-minute break. We'd smoke weed at lunchtime, and it just started spiraling from there on. My first girlfriend in grade 8, I had no idea what a healthy relationship was. And I was with her for 5 years and learned everything through behaviors. I learned how to control, I learned how to manipulate, I learned how to put people down for my own benefit, because that's what I seen around me. That was my teachings were to take everything from me without consideration for others. And that's what was around me, not by my mom, not by my dad, but my surrounding family, the people that I looked up to, the people that were cool in my eyes, the people that I wanted to be like. I was like that until about 28 years old. I had a family, I had 2 children, my third one was on the way. And I got tricked into treatment. I was told that my bills would be paid off, and so I said, well, you can't lose. Went to treatment, and then there I realized I was very, my life was surrounded and was obsessed with alcohol and drugs. So that's when things changed. I started understanding what was really going on. Then I took a year off of work. I was always a functioning alcoholic, you would call it. I was always able to put food on the table. I was always able to have a house. I was always able to have vehicles. Yet in the background, I was suffering from the inside out. So I took a year off work, and I flooded myself with recovery programs. I flooded myself with AA meetings. I surrounded myself with my children. Really kind of gave my new way the best kickstart I could with that year. During that year, we started attending band meetings more and becoming more vocal in the community, trying to understand why I was receiving benefits and the people next to me weren't, even though they're exact same. That always bugged me. I felt shame, I felt resentful. A lot of shame. It's hard to hold your head up when you know that you've benefited from something just because of your last name. And the person next to you has just as much entitlement to that benefit as myself. So when money started getting involved, is when I really started vocalizing what's really happening, my concerns, because good people were getting hurt at the expense of others.